Okay, everyone, still with me? Now, I've given you the big picture about what happens, flows, patterns, shifts, how to think about migration. Let's talk a little bit about how migrants experience their own experience and then also the responses to them by on the part of the state and on the part of the international community. So first of all, let's focus on what happens to migrants, and we can think of their journeys as broken into different parts. It begins for migrants when they make the decision to leave. That decision can be one that's carefully considered in the case of labor migrants, or you can be forced to leave and have to leave very quickly. You don't have much time to plan. Then you're faced with a journey. And during the journey itself, what we see for most migrants of all mixed migration is a journey of much danger. The long transcontinental flows from whether it's across the sub-Saharan Africa and up to north and then across the Mediterranean, whether it's from Central America, which we'll talk about in a second, or whether it's from Afghanistan. These are very dangerous journeys filled with risks, dangers. People are extorted. As we said, you have to hire a smuggler, so it costs a lot of money. These journeys are often in the range of many thousands of dollars that they cost. And you can often lose your money because you'll be deceived by their smuggler, or things will happen. So it's an expensive and dangerous journey. Assuming you make it, you hopefully will end in the destination country where you wanted to go, hopefully. But there you may find a new set of dangers and risks, because very much on what happens to you very much depends on the national policies of that country, whether it's toward refugees, whether it's toward migrants as a whole. Those national policies are going to determine whether you're able to succeed and to do well and to even survive, or whether you will not succeed, you will become even more impoverished and sometimes have to even return, or you may be forced to return because you are deported. So what happens at the level of national policy is a very important determinant of what happens to you as a migrant or a refugee. Then we might focus down to the destination area itself. So if you choose to go to a particular town or a particular region of the country, what happens in what the situation is in that region is also going to determine how well you do and whether you can survive and flourish, or whether you may be much worse off and even at great danger. So in some areas of the world today, some cities and areas, people are very anti-migrant, as we said. And so you as a migrant might face a lot of risks there. You may face the xenophobia, you may face exploitation, harassment. All of these problems are common for migrants. It depends often on the history of migration in that particular region, whether people are used to having migrants come, whether they see them as beneficial or they see them as a burden. So this is the experience of migrants, but it's not as if migrants are passive in all of this. We see that they develop responses and strategies to overcome these problems. And how they do this is a really interesting area of research too. What are the sources of strength and resilience that migrants have? And these are at all of these levels too. During the journey, for example, migrants may have resources that they can draw on. It could be often that's in the form of the diaspora. So they may have relatives or kin in other countries, or in their death, or during the journey, who they can draw on for assistance. Similarly, in the destination countries, it may be that migrants deliberately choose countries or sub-areas within the countries where they have communities, either of kin communities or their own co-nationals, and these communities can provide assistance to migrants. And there are a range of coping and response strategies that migrants develop to support themselves, to protect themselves, and to ensure that they can continue and do well. And this is a very interesting area of research that I'm particularly interested in myself, and which we will discuss in this course too. I just want to talk a little bit, give you an example of one of the most dangerous journeys in the world. Here you see a map of Central America. This area called the Northern Triangle, which you see on the map, which is a combination of Honduras, Nicaragua, and El Salvador, is one of the most dangerous areas in the world today and one of the highest areas of violence, killing, and displacement, because the drug industry, the illicit drug industry, has established itself here, and drug lords and all kinds of other criminals, gangs, have pretty much controlled large areas of land in these areas, displaced hundreds of thousands of people, and in turn forced people to move north to try to escape this. And this city in Honduras, San Pedro Sula, is called the murder capital of the world, or it was until recently, where the highest number of people anywhere comparatively has been killed in the last few years. And so we see a huge number of people leaving these countries and trekking north. You see here the routes coming north from Honduras and up through Mexico into trying to get to the US, but sometimes just trying to get to Mexico too. And these people, this migration flow is comprised of people from this northern triangle, but also part of that flow is also other migrants who have come from Colombia, which is further south, obviously, but also even sub-Saharan migrants have crossed over the Atlantic, gone to South America, and made their way up through South America, through Central America, on their way to the north, El Norte, which is the US. And there's been some interesting work to look at how people survive along these routes. So here again, just to point out, in the destination country, your success depends on a whole range of national policies. If you're a refugee, does the government require that you live in camps? In many African countries, it's required that you live in camps. In much of the Middle East, it's required that you live in camps, but not all places. Or does the government allow you to move into the urban areas and try to find work there? A second issue for the government is whether it allows you to work and pursue livelihoods and move about freely. If you're a refugee and you're able to work, you do a lot better than if you're not allowed to work. And many governments do not allow refugees to work. They want refugees to be taken care of by the international humanitarian system, the humanitarian assistance and aid, and want people to stay in camps where the UN can take care of them. So if you land up in a country with those kinds of policies in place, you're in a lot more trouble than with countries who allow you to move about freely, to work, pursue livelihoods, and so forth. And then, as we said, the politicians' views on refugees, on whether they're xenophobic or welcoming, that's going to make a big difference. And as I said earlier, how successful refugees are depends on also the local attitudes of people, of the host population, whether they're willing to accept refugees, whether they're willing to allow them to work for them without discriminating and exploiting them, whether they're willing to make housing available to them, and so forth. So we've talked a little bit about that. So now what I'd like to do is start talking and have you start thinking about some of what we've been talking about. The first thing I would like you to talk about, and maybe just think about for a minute, is wherever you are in the world, your city that you live in, your country, I would like you to start bringing a migration lens to bear on your city. That is, can you look around you and think about the different kinds of migrants that you see around you? Maybe there are people who are there from other countries for work. Maybe there are people who have come to join their family. Maybe some are looking for education or just tourists. But then, are there refugees in your city, in your town? Are there internally displaced people? In many countries, there are large numbers of IDPs, internally displaced people, who have come to cities and towns to try to find, because they've been displaced, or to find a better life. And people could be both. It could be that they've come to the town looking for work, but it could be that they're also IDPs or refugees. So, could you identify these different groups around you? Do you know individual people like that? Do you know of a refugee camp near your area, or an IDP camp? Who are the migrants? What kind of work do they do? we would like you to just to share some of that with us. Then if you know more about why they came, are they escaping persecution? Are they seeking better economic opportunities? If you could think about that. So that's the first little piece for you. Second, how do these groups manage? Are there some of them that are able to access services in the town? Are they able to find housing easily? Do they have access to health and to schools? Do some do better than others? Who is better and who is better off and who is worse off? And we would just want you to think about that for a minute. Are refugees able to put their children in schools? Are migrants able to put their children in schools? What's the general attitude about using the services of the town? Third question for you is we want you to, and you can kind of, combine some of these questions together. So the third question is, imagine that you're an advisor to the mayor of your city, and there's been this influx of, say, migrants or refugees, mixed flows. What do you think the mayor needs to know to make an informed decision? What is important for the mayor to focus on? What does the mayor need to do you think? Should the mayor grant these groups certain privileges because they're displaced and they may have some specific needs? Or should the mayor just treat them as a group that should be, set aside and put in a camp somewhere? Or should the mayor allow them just to be integrated and to do what they want? Should the mayor look for providing certain extra services to them? Or should the mayor try to be assisting the area into which they move? In many towns, in many urban areas, refugees tend to move into what we call the informal settlements, or the informally settled areas around the towns, which are usually the poorer slum areas. Is that where refugees and migrants are living? And what should the mayor do? Should the mayor support those areas or just leave them to their own devices? So we would like you to think about these. It's what we're calling bringing a migration lens to bear. Figuring out, analyzing who the different groups are, what kinds of problems, if any, they have, what should be done with them, and what do you think the urban government, the mayor or your town, should do with them? We'd like you to think about that and post online, and because we're very interested to hear what you have to say. So that's all from me. Thanks and bye.